affect you going forward. There are big impacts to be had on taxes, on your funding options, depending on the kind of business structure that we choose. Now, it also, the kind of business structure we choose will also define ownership. It will define profit sharing. It will define longevity of the business. There are some businesses that the kind of structure we choose, once the owner dies, the business dies. There are some, even when the owner passes on, the business lives. How there are some structures where your personal assets are protected, some are not. We're going to go into all of that. And at the end of this, you'll be able to find out for yourself what structure is right for you based on where you are in your journey. We're going to start with the very popular one, the sole proprietorship. For the sole proprietorship, this is the simplest and the most affordable form of business structure. It has the minimal red tape. You know, this is the one where there is no difference between you, the owner of the business, and the business. Now, the simplicity, however, comes at a cost. The business is not a legal entity separate from you, the owner. What does that mean? That means that you are using your personal name, your personal account, and everything that you own is at risk when you're running a sole proprietorship. Now, the owner has unlimited liability. Everything is at risk. That means if something goes wrong with the business, guess what? You can be sued. Personally, everything you own people can come after that. Now, that is not the best in this day and age, you know. So while we know that that is not the best, for some people, that may be the only thing that they can afford at that time. Now, let's look very briefly at some of the pros and cons of having a sole proprietorship. I mentioned earlier, it's easy to set up. That's an advantage. You don't have to do too much. Your name is there. You have a personal account. You do business. It goes into your personal account. You have complete control as a sole proprietor. You make all the decisions. You don't have to wait for anybody. Your taxes are simple. Your taxes go straight into your when you're filing, you file right along with your own personal taxes. Now, and there's minimal startup and business cost. In fact, that is one of the reasons why people gravitate towards it, because the operational cost is minimal, the startup cost is little to nothing, and there are no special filings for a sole proprietorship. Now, we've talked about the advantages. Let us look at some of the disadvantages. While it is easy to set up, it has the lowest protection for an owner. You have unlimited liability. People can come after your personal properties, your homes, your cars, anything you own, if the business goes belly up. Now, you are fully liable for the company's finance and legal, challenges. So that means if the IRS comes knocking, that you cannot say, oh, I wasn't aware, or, whatever. There are no excuses. You are held liable, not the entity, because you and the entity are one and the same. Now, it is very difficult for a sole proprietor to secure loans for a business. When a business is growing and you're getting to the point where you're going to need loans, you're going to need capital, somebody to invest capital into your business. That is a no-no. Nobody wants to invest in sole proprietorship. And also, as a sole proprietor, there's limited growth potential. That means because you don't have access to a large pool of funds, and because you don't have access to other people's ideas, you are the only person. You are the chief. You are the one in charge of everything, making all the decisions. How far you can go is extremely limited. And like I said earlier, the personal assets are at risk. So now, if you are somebody like a freelance photographer or a landscaper or somebody who is a personal trainer. That may be a good structure to have for doing that kind of stuff, for offering that kind of service. So it still has its uses. But when you are trying to grow out of that, then you have to start considering other things. And that leads us to the second business structure, which is partnership. Everybody's familiar with this. Two or more individuals come together with a view of running a business to make profit. Now, then they form a partnership. It might be somebody. Now, the partnership runs in several ways. There are general, there are limited, and there are passive partners. You have to understand that with multiple owners, allowing for shared profits, responsibilities, and also for liabilities, this is very good for partnership. That means that when you're running the business, all of you are going to share the profits according to how you invested into it. Let's say the business, the startup amount was 100,000. We have ABC partnership. Mr. A had in 60%, 60,000. Mr. B had in, let's say, 20%. That is 20,000. And Mr. C, another 20,000. Now we have 100. So now we have a ratio 6-2-2. In that same order, that is the same order which you will share profits and which you will share losses in a partnership. Except if you are, there are other addendum. There are general partners, there are limited partners, and then there are passive partners. And we'll talk about that. Now, for a general partner, this is where everybody shares responsibilities equally, profits and liabilities. We are all general partners. And for general partners, it's relatively easy to set up, few upkeep costs. It is not expensive. If one partner leaves, the entire business can be dissolved. It can be dissolved. Every partner has a right to participate in the day-to-day business operations and decision-making. So this is not a case of, I'm the boss, I'm the sole proprietor, only me. No, each partner is equally liable for whatever happens. If one partner makes a bad decision, it affects all the other partners. And no one can say, well, I wasn't there. You have to be, you are part of it. And each partner has a say, a voice in making decisions, whether legal or otherwise, for the health of the business. In a general partnership, all partners share responsibility. So whether the business is in debt or the business is doing well, they are going to share that equally, irrespective of who caused it. It doesn't matter. It could be partner A or partner C that caused the problem, but all across board, everyone will share that. Now, how is that different, you might say, from the structure of a limited partnership? How is that different? Well, a limited partner requires at least one general partner to manage the business and at least one limited partner who provides funding, but who doesn't necessarily participate in the daily, day-to-day activity. So that partner will be almost like a passive partner. Now, in a limited partnership, the general partners take on most of the bulk of the work. So that means you started this business, you have a general partner. Oftentimes they come in with the knowledge, the know-how, they know, they have experience, they know what they're doing, and they can run the business, very, very well. And they would be reporting to the other partners how the business is going. Now, the limited partners have little control over the management of the company. Now, that is one thing, because you have the general partner who is the one taking most of the decisions. So a limited partnership is such where each one is only liable in their own financial state. So for instance, I talked about the 60-20-20. You are only responsible for as much as you have invested into the business. Should it go bankrupt or should it fall into debt? So for instance, the one with the largest stake, 60%, oftentimes they are the general partner. Sometimes they're like, okay, you know what? Or it could be somebody that has the 20% as the general partner, and the other two are just other partners, limited partners. So, but they all earn share of the profit. And the profit sharing is based on how they contributed to the business. So if let's assume they make whatever, a profit at the end of the fiscal year, partner Mr. A will get 60% of the profit. Mr. B will get 20%, Mr. C will get 20%, on and on. And that's how, and if it were debts and losses, that is exactly how it will be shared in that very same ratio. Limited partnerships are easy to set up and dissolve. They are not, because oftentimes most people use them for projects. They use them for like joint ventures. Sometimes you may have 3 or 4 partners in a particular project. Once that project is done, the partnership may choose to dissolve if it's a joint venture, and that's it, and they're done. Now, they may reconvene another time. One of them may be absent, and a whole new person may be introduced and form a different partnership. So it doesn't mean that it's the same set of people that have to do the same businesses at all times. Now, so what are limited partnerships useful for? They are useful for things like film productions, small business that require an investment upfront, and also for things like real estate. If you want to partner, maybe 2 or 3 people want to partner together, come together to do some real estate business, limited partnerships are really, really good for this. Now, then we're going to talk about the limited liability partnerships. Now, the limited liability partnership are owned by 2 or more partners who are liable for their conduct, and they are not responsible for the actions of the others. So these are 2 or more, they are only responsible for their own conduct. So that means that in that partnership, there is limited liability, as opposed to the other one before, where it's according to what you put in. So partners have a profit sharing ratio in this that protects them from debts. It protects them from liabilities from the company as a whole. They will decide on those numbers before they move forward. Now, also, a limited liability partnership are often restricted to certain professions, such as the medical profession, those people who are the lawyers or accountants. This is very common with these professions, very, very common. Now, overhead costs, administrative costs, and profits are shared amongst them as they agreed. And also, the limited liability partnerships provide additional separation between personal and company assets. So that is an additional layer of protection, which the sole proprietor does not have. So it's very important that we understand these structures, because understanding the structures and understanding your own risk level or risk tolerance and the kind of business you have in mind will inform you to choose a particular structure. There are some structures that are particularly, like I mentioned, they are for some particular professions. They are already there, and that's the way you go. But there are some that, you're like, okay, this is for this profession, but am I ready for this risk at this time? Can I bear this risk? Can I take this risk? Can I tolerate it? You have to really ask yourself the honest, the questions and give an honest answer. Now, having talked about that, the next structure, the next business structure is very popular. Everybody knows it's an LLC, limited liability company. It's extremely popular. Now, these LLCs combine the liability protection of corporations with the tax advantage and flexibility of partnership. It is really a sweet spot. Now, for an LLC, it's a separate entity. It is distinct and recognized under the law as a legal entity separate from the owner. So, for instance, you might have Mrs. Joseph, and she started a bakery, and she called the bakery J&J Bakeries. Now, Mrs. Joseph, if the structure she chose for her bakery is an LLC, J&J Bakery will be distinct and a legal entity separate from her. Her personal account will be separate. J&J Bakery will have a separate account, and on and on. And there shouldn't be any commingling. She should not use the business credit card for personal stuff. Nor should she deposit money for J&J Bakeries into her personal account, because they are two separate entities. Now, this LLC, it serves a purpose to shield the owner from unlimited liability risks, or from personal liability. They are also like a pass-through taxation. That means you avoid the need to separate your business tax filings from your personal tax filings. That's one of the advantages. When you're filing your personal tax, it goes under that, which is really, really good as a pass-through when you're filing. Now, however, there are some requirements that are important and we need to adhere to while forming an LLC. Like filing articles of operation, like appointing a registered agent, because you want to keep your personal identity separate from your business identity, so that if anything happens, it is your business that gets sued, not you as a person, and nobody comes after you. These types of businesses do not offer, there are some disadvantages. It does not offer stocks for employees or outside investors. I will talk a little bit more about that. What's the good thing about having an LLC? One of the good things about it is that you are able to get funding, because now you have this entity that is separate and distinct from you, the person, and you are able to do much more, because now you can open it up for the public to invest in your company, and on and on. And while you may still have that leeway of managing it on a day-to-day basis, which is really, really good. And but also you're going to have board of directors. So now let's do a quick comparison between, let's compare limited liability company to sole proprietorship and corporation. So for the LLC, this is a blend of partnership and cooperation. Like I said, this is a distinct legal entity. You are separate from the owner, and your liability, you are not open to personal unlimited liability. Only the business is liable, not you. Now, the owner's assets are protected from debts or damages accrued by the company. I talked about that. And the LLC uses the pass-through. For the sole proprietorship, you don't have to register. You are unincorporated. You don't have to, you can be you are a single business owner, and you are not creating a separate identity from your business. You and your business are one and the same. Now, a single member LLC usually dissolves upon the owner's death. Now, that is one thing. Now, where there's a multi-member LLC, if one of the members die, the business can still continue. The other members can continue managing the business. So if you want to have an LLC, you have to figure out, are you particular about continuity? Do you want this business to continue after you are gone or not? Depending on how much control you want to have. And lastly, we will talk about the corporation, the C corporation and the S corporation. And this exists separately from the owners. And it conducts its own businesses and holds its assets, while the owners have limited liability for the company's debts and actions. Now, corporations have corporate governance structure. This includes boards of directors, it includes officers. They're going to have a lot of meetings a year. There's a structure of business which is very complex and difficult to keep. Now, it's complex to establish. It requires articles of incorporation. It also requires a lot of information. The name, the location of the place, the statement of purpose, all of those things have to be part of what is available for the public. Now, what are the major differences between a C Corp and an S Corp? And you cannot run a business without knowing which structure is good for you and run it successfully. Sometimes people choose the wrong structures, and that becomes a stumbling block for them later on. So the C corporation are taxed on their profits, and the employees and the shareholders are taxed on their income. I'll repeat that. For the C corporation, they are taxed on their profits, and their employees and shareholders are taxed on their income. But for the S corporation, it passes through taxation. It's a pass-through taxation. There is no individual, that doesn't happen like taxing on the profits and taxing the employees. No, that doesn't happen. Now, for a C corp, there is no limit on the number of shares a C corp can have. But for an S corp, in most states, the S corp are limited to 100 shareholders. There's a limit. And another thing is this: all of those 100 shareholders, they must reside in the United States of America. They cannot be permanent residents of other places. They are not, then in that case, you cannot form an S corp. Now, C corporations have multiple classes of stocks. An S corp has only one class of stock. These are things that I'm explaining this so that way person will now realize, okay, what is my goal in this business? What am I trying to achieve? Based on that, that is what will direct you to whether your company, whether you're going to have a C corp or an S corp as your business structure. And also for a C corporation, public stock offerings are a common way to raise capital. So you can, you hear things like, IPO, initial public offerings. You open up the company to outside investors, where the shares are sold, for money to come in, for capital investment into the company. Now, however, for S corporations, raising capital is generally more restricted. You don't have those kind of offerings or options. And then lastly, one structure that is not very common, it's used by people like farmers and things like that, is what we call the co-op, the cooperative. This is a business structure as well. It's a corporation that is owned by employees, employees and customers, or both. So that means the people that own it are also the employees and are also customers. And it is taxed on the individual level, similar to an S corp or to a partnership. Now, there are no, in a cooperative, there are no shareholders, there are no stakeholders, and no one owner has a significant stake in the organization. So everybody are at par, all are the same. Each member has an equal say and are all invested and vested in the success of the company. So this is not a case of I have a general partner and I have a limited passive partner and I'm controlling and making decisions and my passive partner can't say anything. No. Now, what type of businesses, what are some of the drawbacks? Some of the drawbacks is that sometimes making decisions together, because there are always so many people involved in a co-op, it takes a long time to come to a quorum. So business decisions are made very slowly. Therefore, growth is slow. The window of opportunity may come to make a decision quickly. If it's one person, that decision will be made. With the co-op, you need to sit down, you need to arrange a meeting, everybody has to talk and disagree to agree and all of that. And while that is going on, time, that opportunity may have passed you by. Also, cash flow issues may present themselves because all of them may want to grow at different levels. They have different ideas of in which direction the co-op should go. Examples of businesses that use this kind of things are cooperative home care, like Sunkist, and then Land O'Lakes. These are examples of businesses that use this same business structure. Also, the last one is a non-profit organization. That is where the church falls on that. We know what that means. You are setting up this 501c3c for the purpose of not making any money, but serving the community, either through is a religious affiliation or what have you. Now, having talked about all of this, it's oftentimes we discover that when somebody is about to start a business, they do not really think about how does their own plan fit into the structure. They just jump and decide, somebody formed this business, this is the structure they have, I am going to have the same structure. That doesn't work. And that would not work. There's no one size fits all. You have to look at your own individual situation, what you're trying to accomplish, what arsenals you have available to you, and then which structure will work best for you. Now, so after you've now decided upon a structure, we're going to now look into business types, because we hear a lot of people say, well, it's all well and good. We now know what structures to have, but what kind of businesses really can I run? Can I start? I really don't know much about businesses. So there are general business categories, and we're going to run through some of them tonight. There are service-based businesses. This type of businesses provide services focusing on customer experience. What does that mean? It means like consulting businesses, like salons, like transportation businesses, repair service businesses. If something is wrong with your HVAC and you call the HVAC company and they come to you, now that, those are service-based businesses. Hospitality, such as restaurants, such as hotels, these are all service-based businesses. However, we will discover that most of these businesses, if it depends on if you want to start it as a sole proprietor, it's low initial startup cost because you're just the one person. And if you are running a service business, you have the flexibility to run it and fit your own schedule, because you are the one running the business and you can adapt it to somebody can have a 9 to 5, and on the weekend they still run a small, a small transportation business. Maybe they're doing an Uber or something on the weekends. And you choose your times. Nobody chooses it for you. So there's a lot of flexibility. And then as an Uber driver, you have direct interaction with your clients. And that goes for any service-based business. Now, what are some of the disadvantages of running that? The income is dependent on the time you spend on it and your expertise. Say, for instance, however hours you give to driving as an Uber driver on the weekend will determine how much money you make, because you're by yourself. Now, sometimes some of the service-based businesses may require licensing or certification. Some may not, some may. So you have to find out. And the revenue is not constant. It is fluctuating. Now, and that is for a service-based business, because there are times when it is seasonal. You might be doing the rainy season, some businesses pick up more. And then, during, like for instance, during the summer, you have all of these mosquito businesses, Mosquito Joe and all of these people, they rack in a lot of revenue because that is when the mosquitoes are active. But by the end of October, that business has to come to an abrupt end because the mosquitoes are gone. They cannot withstand the cold. And that business has to shut. So it's cyclical. It only runs for some few months in a year. So as opposed to a bakery where everybody will eat bread or something baked at every point in time or the other. Yes, it doesn't matter whether it's January or whether it's December. Now, another category of business that while you're thinking, what can I do? It can be product-based business. Now, this could be, e-commerce, retail stores, manufacturing. These are the kind of businesses where physical or digital products are being sold. There can be a hybrid of your online presence. You have a website, and you also have a physical brick and mortar, and now you have to think, if I'm starting small and I have limited resources, will I be able to, have a brick and mortar immediately? So it's always advisable to have an online presence. There's so many of them these days. There's Shopify, there's Etsy, there's Instagram, there's TikTok. There are business platforms on all of this. Amazon, name it. I can go on and on and on. Now the thing therein is, while you are building, while you have this business, you can, it gives you consistent streams of income if you run it the way it's supposed to. With your own, you have an online presence, you're doing your marketing properly. People know your brand is visible and you're out there. People know what you are about. On an e-commerce scale, when you have e-commerce, you're global. Anybody, anywhere in the world can reach you. Example of such things are like Alibaba. I believe it's a Chinese-based e-commerce business, but it's known all over the world. Amazon, same thing. There are so many like that. And then there's also potential for passive income, which means those things can be online, and you have an automated system that fulfills orders, and you don't have to lift a finger, and money is coming in. That is one thing. Now, however, let's look at the other side of running a product-based business. The inventory cost is high because you have to be able to, keep inventory so that when your customers ask for your products, they're available. If you are a small business and every time that an order is, put through to your online, you take too long to fulfill that order, you will lose business to your competitor. That is very, very, very important. Then there are a lot of challenges, logistically, that people face, from getting products from the warehouse to the middleman, storing it somewhere in the interim, how shipping costs and things of that nature. Now, and supply chain management. So sometimes, getting it from the main warehouse to the middleman before it gets to the storage place, and then before it gets to the final consumer. There are times when, managing the supply chain becomes a bottleneck. Somebody drops the ball somewhere, and what should take 5 days to get to the consumer now takes 25 days. And that would affect the way your business is being run. Also, the intense competition on the market. There are so many businesses that have those kind of structures that I talked about. Now, another structure, the third structure, is online and digital business. Now, these kind of businesses primarily sell their goods and services through the internet, generating revenue by selling products directly through their website. That's all they do, just through the website. They're not going through, some examples could be like affiliate marketing, drop shipping. Everybody's familiar with drop shipping. Back in the day, that used to be a money-making thing, until the advent of other ways of making money. Now, what are some of the benefits that online or digital business can enjoy? Now, a global audience is one, which is very, very good. Streamlining operations to reduce costs, which is also very good. And now, with the advent of AI, there are endless possibilities to what automation and data analytics, the information you can get as to how to make your business grow and do better and perform better based on what is in front of you. Now, the online and digital business offers potential growth by enabling brands to access, a global customer base. For instance, if somebody is on Amazon or you're on Alibaba or DHL or one of those big platforms, not only are you now visible to people who are in your state or in your country, but now your brand is now being pushed out there for the whole world to see. Now, that is a great advantage. That equals more sales, more revenue. More profit. Who wouldn't be happy with that? Now, it also enables brands to quickly adapt to new technologies. So when you are online and you're digital, you are always keeping up with the market trends. You have a host of people who that is their job to find out what is the newest trend, how our customers, what is the customer pattern, how can our business shape ourselves around these newest trends, empowering companies to build strong relationships through interactive platforms and personalized communication. Now you can personalize some things to fit your targeted audience. And that is really what the whole world, is gearing towards these days. However, there are still some potential challenges that online, and digital businesses face. Cybersecurity problems, yes. There are a lot of times where there are some threats to the security of the data that is available, Now, some people will be like, well, that's just a risk that everybody has to take these days. Not everybody, but it's more prevalent within this community. Now, attracting new customers and keeping them loyal is also a struggle because of the fierce competition. It's almost as though everyone is mirroring each other in their offerings. So that is why it is important that as a small business, you have to have strong branding so that you can have a strong presence. And what you are all about there must be something that separates you from the crowd and separates you from everybody else. Otherwise, you will get lost. You will get lost, in the milieu of offerings online. There's sometimes when you look at one business and you look at the other, and you cannot tell which one is different from the other because there is no strong branding. There's no mission statement. There's nothing that speaks to you, nothing that will make you remember, oh, wow, this company, this is what makes them distinct and different from the other companies. And that leads to, big problems down the line. Now, one of the very last big businesses that people are it's been around for the longest, and it's not going anywhere, is the brick and mortar business. Now, this is a term used to describe business that is located in a physical place. It has, you can drive to exactly where it is. Now, in this physical place, whether it's a product, whether it's a service, is being sold there, and customers come there. So there's interactive face-to-face. You interact face-to-face with your customers because they're going to make an appointment, they're going to come and see you, and you are going to, talk to them about the products or the services that you are offering. Now, these businesses often lease or own the building where they're operating in, or the warehouse, or they have a warehouse, it's manufacturing, where the operations are, where they're operating from. Now, there is something that the brick and mortar offers that online shopping cannot. It's called a real-time experience. You're there in flesh. You can actually see the product. You can touch it. You can smell it. Online, you can see the picture. There are descriptions of what the product can do, but you might not have the ability to that brand visibility to see the product. It's not there. And then there's a sense of community. When a business has been in a particular locale for so long, everybody in the community, they know the business. Like a pharmacy store that has been there for 60 years, the grandfather passed it on to the father passed it on to the son. Everybody in that little community, that is the pharmacy that they use. So there's a sense of community where you feel like, okay, you are not just now operating in this community, you become part of the community now. And one of the good things about brick and mortar also is that there's a sense of loyalty. Because you are a part of the community, oftentimes the owners are members of that community themselves. People come out to give you support. And it increases your sales revenue because now there's loyalty. There's a lot of loyalty. Also, there's personalized service. Most of the brick and mortar businesses personalize their services to individuals. And even in this day and age, people still love personalized services. They love it. Now, when somebody comes through the door, you know their name, you remember what product they like, you remember how they like it, remember the size they like, they feel seen. And as such, they will come back again and again to purchase your product. Examples of such places are retail stores, gyms, grocery stores, restaurants, coffee shops. There are some coffee shops, there are some places that some people go there, they've been going there for years, where the owners and their customers have even become like friends and family over a period of time. Now, that is one of the greatest advantages of having a brick and mortar business. And moving on, we're going to move on to a very popular mode of business called the franchise business. Now, this is a type of business model where the company allows individuals to operate a business using the company's brand, the company's logo, the company's marketing tactics. All the company has done the work already. All the person needs to do is invest a certain amount of money, and it's like a turnkey automated system. And what you have to do is you're going to attend some trainings, and they will show you how they run that system, and you just follow the system as it is. There is no need to reinvent the wheel. Now, and the owner of such a business is called a franchisee, and the company that owns the business is a franchisor. That's what it's called. However, the owner of the business gives the franchisee the right to sell the company's products, and for having that right, there's a payment. It's not free. It doesn't come free. There are requirements to be met before you can be approved to be part of a franchise and to be an owner of a franchise. If the colors of the franchise are green and blue, you cannot decide one day, I'm tired of green and blue, I want to paint it yellow. No, you have to stick with that color, because that is part of the branding, that is part of what makes them who they are. And then there are ongoing franchise fees that the business owner will pay to the franchisor for allowing them to operate that business. Now, what are some of the examples of such popular franchises? I'm sure when I start mentioning them, it will make sense. McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, Starbucks, Dollar Tree, just to name a few. Domino's, someone like Anytime Fitness. Let me see. Hilton Worldwide is also Worldwide is also a franchise. And if you notice, it doesn't matter Sorry for the break in transmission. Not sure exactly what happened there. So back to what I was saying. Can you all hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Okay, very well. So back to what I was saying. The franchises here, you have to operate them and follow the rules. Or, you cannot decide not to follow the rules. For every owner of a franchise, there are operating costs and there's some fees that you have to pay on an annual basis. It's called ongoing franchise fees. You have to pay those. And then one of the disadvantages of a franchise is that it has limited creativity and control. It's very important. Now, you cannot call and decide, well, guess what? I'm not going to run it this way anymore. This formula that we have for making our beef patty, I want to change it. I want to use something else. No, you can't do that. There is little to no room for you to have a better idea than what is on ground. You have to follow what is written to the letter. Now, it is important to understand these things because there are times when people are like, well, you know what? I have the money. I can just go ahead and buy a franchise. Well, ask yourself the question as a person. Are you creative? Are you the kind of person that gets easily bored with monotony? If you are doing one thing over and over again, will you get bored or will you be happy and contented doing that? So you really have to ask yourself. Now, if you are the kind of person where you love creativity, you love doing different things every day, then a monotonous thing might not be that kind of business where there's so much monotony, doing the same thing over and over again, day in, day out. That might not be the business for you. So the business also has to match your personality and your goals. And that is why it is important to understand the nature of these businesses. And the very last one is a subscription-based business. These are businesses where you are charged a recurring fee for having access to a product or a service. All of us are aware of things like that, whether for streaming services like Netflix or Hulu or things like that, software companies like Microsoft, where you're using something and every month, you're being charged. Apple will charge you for, using the Apple Music or whatever it is that you use. And there are subscription boxes, different ones like Blue Apron and like Dollar Shave Club, where you have to pay a certain amount on a recurring basis for having that service. So it's important to find out in which area that all these things fall. So starting and running a business, it entails a lot more than just having a structure and going over that. The very last key to that is, organizational strategy. So now that you have the structure in place, now that you know the kind of businesses you have, what kind of strategy are you going to put in place? Then how do you measure your success as a business? When creating strategy, it has to be measurable. There must be ways for you to say, okay, I'm going to, when I start this business, this is what I want to achieve in the first 2 years. In the first 5 years, these are my goals, and they are measurable. And okay, so the next 10 years, these are my goals, and they are measurable. Things like, if I say, for instance, I'm a small business and I sell products, and I say, I want to sell products faster. What does that really mean? Sell products faster. How am I going to measure that? How would I know if I'm selling faster? Am I keeping record of what I'm selling? Am I comparing 1 year to another, 1 month to another? As opposed to saying, we want to sell our products at a 25% increased rate over last year's number. Now, that is measurable. So that means if you sold 100 last year, this year your goal is to sell 125. If you sold 100,000, you want to sell 125,000. That is a 25% increase over what you sold last year. That is how you can measure your organizational strategies. That is how you can determine if, as a small startup, are you reaching the goals that you set for yourself. If after the end of the second year, you made 100,000, then, or 102 and not 125,000, then you didn't reach the goal that you set for yourself. So it's very important that you understand that. Also, while it is good to have strategy, it has to be realistic. So consider what past achievements and think about what is going to take for you to do better than that. For example, if your company, let's say, previously raised its profits from 400,000 to 600,000 last year, consider striving to raise the profits from 800,000 rather than to 1 million. You want it to be realistic. You want it to be things, objectives that can be achieved. And you do not want it to be something that is really out of your reach. Otherwise, the company, the morale of every employee, it goes down. And even you, the owner, you begin to get discouraged. And that zeal and fire and passion for what you love doing will dwindle. Now, organizational strategies are limited or time-bound. That means, of course, you must have a deadline. Like I said earlier, short-term goals, long-term goals. And this may fluctuate as the business fluctuates. So what are the types of strategies? How do we strategize, especially with a new business? Now, businesses select their strategies based on their vision and their position. I'm going to repeat that. A new business will select their organizational strategy based on their vision and their position in the marketplace. So the vision for what they want to achieve in the marketplace and their position when they're comparing themselves to their competitors in the marketplace. Now, so for you to have a competitive advantage, it is really imperative that that is done. Now, what are the types of organizational strategies that a small startup can have? Number one, focus strategy. This is a method that involves finding a niche market group for yourself. You focus on that niche and you do everything in your power to capture that niche. There's always a very small, select group. So your targeted audience is not everybody. You may have a product and you decide, well, you know what? This product, I'm going to focus on men. I'm making beard balms for men's beard, and I'm going to focus on men from, just between the ages of 18 and maybe 65. That is the group that I want. That is the group that I want to hone in on. Then I'm going to find out what they like, how they like it, and make that reflect in my product that I'm offering. Now, the goal is to produce high quality products and high quality customer service, personalized customer service, so that those customers become loyal to your brand. That is the goal when you focus. Now, for instance, we have some companies that are like, I'm looking for a very practical example, like an almond milk company. It targets vegans because almond milk is from a fruit, from a nut, pardon me. And for those who are vegans and who do not want anything from an animal like cow milk, that is an outlet for them. They can get the benefits of milk, but they're getting it from a nut and not from an animal. Because in most cases, we have some people who are lactose intolerant. They cannot, the system cannot tolerate the milk coming from the cow. So they can tolerate the milk coming from, from the nut. So if a business focuses on that and hone in on that particular group, they are going to make a killing. Now, another type of strategy is low-cost production. This is a strategy where a company offers the best price for its products or service. So the company will do some research, finding out what other companies selling the similar products like you are selling, how much they're selling it. And then, you now decide to make your own prices a little bit lower than those other ones. What are you trying to do there? You're trying to encourage the customers to purchase yours because it's more affordable, while you are not reducing the quality of your offering, whether it's a product or a service. Now, to provide low prices, what would you have to do? You have to minimize your costs of labor. That means you must have access to low cost production. So that means you must have that access to that. And you keep your prices low, you keep your customers happy, and then they remain loyal to you. Now, that is another one. Now, another organizational strategy that a startup business can have is called differentiation. Now, this is an approach where a company strives to be the best in its industry and to make itself distinct, unique, and separate from all the other businesses. Now, to do this, they offer innovative products. That means, and services with unique features. That means that when somebody sees your product, immediately they know it's from you, because there's something unique about your product which other products do not have. Now, what is involved to get to this point? In-depth research. You have to research and find out the products that are existing in the market. What are the complaints of the consumers? What would they love to see that is not there right now? How can you make that happen? That is where you come in. And that is why you make your product unique. And therefore, they become loyal to you. In most cases, if your product can meet the demands of the consumers, you can even be in a situation where you can create a waiting list, and they will be willing to wait till your product is available before buying that product. They will not go and buy from the competitors just because they love the unique feature that is attached to what you're offering. That is really important. Now, another strategy is growth strategy. It is important for a startup business to be concerned about how your company will grow, how you will expand. Otherwise, if it doesn't grow, it will die. It's one or the other. Now, are you going to increase the sales in the area? Are you going to, market aggressively? Are you going to employ independent sales consultants to help you push your market? There are some people who are very good at selling products or services. There are companies that employ salesmen and they give them commissions, and then they go out there and sell your business. They sell your products. They sell your services. Now, so it's important, because when they do that, then the company begins to grow, because when sales, the sales comes in, the revenue goes up, the company expands. There is growth. And then the very last organizational strategy is called rationalization. This is when a business decides to reorganize to become more efficient. What does that mean? Often this means reducing staff members. Some people get laid off. The structure, the structure of operations gets changed around. Some arms of the operations, become redundant and no longer needed, or no longer needed in service. The program that existed 20 years ago has to be, fine-tuned and changed at this point. Now, sometimes, how do you see that? There are times where you may have, for instance, you may have maybe, let me use like a Taco Bell has 20 locations all across the state, and all of a sudden you're finding out in the third quarter they are closing down 5 of the locations. Now they have only